understand how we make rock candy, we first have to understand what two terms mean. And these terms are saturated solutions and unsaturated solutions. So here I have a pot of boiling water. We have 1 cup of water in here. And in order to make a batch of rock candy, you need 1 part water and 2 parts sugar. So I've got my 1 cup of boiling water here. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to add half a cup of sugar here. So we're going to stir. And if you're patient, you'll see that the water will actually dissolve this half cup of sugar. So we're starting to see that we can no longer see the sugar at the bottom of the pot, and it's dissolving into the water. Interesting. So if we add another half cup of sugar to this, and we stir, we're going to wait patiently and see what happens. So we're starting to see that all the sugar is dissolving into the water once again. So now we're at 1 part sugar and 1 part water. So that's not quite the amount that the recipe for rock candy says. And now we see that all the sugar has dissolved. So we're going to add another half cup of sugar. We want to do this a little bit at a time. Okay, and we're going to keep stirring. Once again, you start to see that quickly the sugar is dissolving into the water. So now we're at 1.5 cups of sugar and just 1 cup of boiling water. Remember that it's different when we have boiling water versus room temperature water. Oh, so now we can see it's clear again. The sugar is dissolved. And I'm going to add my last cup, half cup of sugar to the water. Let's see. And this is where our terms are going to come into use. So remember the two terms are saturated solutions and unsaturated solutions. Alright, so we're stirring and it's becoming more and more difficult for the water to dissolve all the sugar. And we start to see that the sugar is starting to accumulate at the bottom of the pot, and it's not fully being dissolved. So we've now reached the point of saturation. So we have a saturated solution because the boiling water is no longer able to hold any more sugar. So at that point it becomes a supersaturated solution, which means when we let this solution cool, we're going to start to see the sugar re-emerge. So water at room temperature is no longer able to hold the sugar, and the sugar will crystallize either onto the wooden skewer or even onto the bottom of your jar. So let's just do a little recap of what happened. We added 1 part water, 2 parts sugar. So we added 1 cup of water to our pot and 2 cups of sugar very slowly until we started to see that the sugar in the boiling water was starting to pool at the bottom and the water could no longer dissolve all that sugar. Our solution was saturated right up until the point where the sugar started to accumulate at the bottom of the pot. At that point, it became a supersaturated solution, which means that the water could no longer hold that sugar. Saturation occurs when no more sugar can be absorbed, combined with, or added to the boiling water. Supersaturation is a state of the solution that contains more of the sugar than could be dissolved by the water when the water is at room temperature. What is crystallization of sugar? Crystallization is basically when solid crystals form in a solution and your liquids and solids are separating. In the context of making rock candy, crystallization of sugar occurs when solid sugar crystals form in the supersaturated solution that you made by adding more sugar than the water could hold. The crystallization is what we see when sugar comes back out of the solution in the form of larger crystals as it cools and sits. Remember, when water is at a high temperature, it is able to hold more sugar than when it is at a low temperature. So when the solution is taken off the stovetop and slowly cools, sugar is released. But how exactly does the sugar come back out of the solution, you might ask? Let me explain. When you have put more sugar into your solution than it can hold, and it is a saturated solution, you are ready to grow crystals, or rock candy. The extra sugar that you have added and makes it a supersaturated solution is what will allow this to happen. So it has to be supersaturated in order for crystals to grow. You can see this as the seed from which your rock candy will grow. We don't want to add too much extra sugar because sugar crystallization occurs best when the level of supersaturation is low. You pour your solution into a jar and suspend a wooden skewer from the jar after the solution has cooled down. At this point, your primary crystal will form because you added too much sugar in your solution and that sugar was not dissolved. The growth of further crystals in the form of rock candy will occur when there's some kind of contact between the solution you made and something else. That something else could be either your wooden skewer, your jar, or another crystal. Sometimes it's effective to roll your wooden skewer in white sugar before suspending it into the solution in order to optimize the possibility of contact. This will jumpstart the crystal formation. This can be another way of providing your solution with a sort of seed to start from. From here, you will see crystallization start to occur. Here's an example of a piece of rock candy that I made. If you look closely, you can see that I have a lot of tiny crystals. This likely occurred because my supersaturated solution cooled down really quickly. If you wanted to make a piece of rock candy with larger and fewer crystals, you could control the environment so that the supersaturated solution cooled down more slowly.